We are in Likkutei Torah, Parshas Eikev, Daf Tezvav. We're starting from the end of Daf Yudalid and Oz Gimel, and we are now up to, I'll share the screen here, we're now up to the inyan in that we mentioned in the second bracha of Ala Oretz. We mentioned Tzarech She'azker Ba Bris V'Torah. So now we know that the first bracha Hazan is talking about the man, this very high level. Then the second bracha Ala Oretz V'Alamosan is this lower level of Birur Hanitzutzis, the inyan of Birur of Ban. But the question now is why do we have the inyan of Bris and Torah in the bracha of Haaretz? That we say Al Brischa shechasamta bivsarenu v'al terascha shelimaretanu. So how is that involved? So basically, what the Alter Rebbe is going to be explaining here is that to go from the very high level that we described, which Mon represents, to come down into the level of Eretz, to the level of Malchus, to be able to be poil the inyan of Yehuda Tata, Bittul Hayesh. How do you get from Yehuda Ilah to Yehuda Tata? It's not just a direct connection. And basically, we're going to need two different elements of connections, one of them being Torah, one of them being Bris. And then we're going to go on to explain why Dafka, the inyan of Bris, comes before the inyan of Torah. All right. So the inyan is because the Hamshacha, this Hamshacha of Yehuda Ilah, of Chachmei Ilah and Berchas Hazan, that it should be drawn down into Yehuda Tata Berchas Haaretz. This is through Bris and Torah. So the Alter Rebbe explains that inyan of Moshe is Kvad Peh and Kvad Lashon. We see here in the box that basically Moshe is from such a level, such a high level, that he's beyond the inyan of expression. That's Kavad Peh. And Moshe, of course, is connected to Man. He's connected to Berchas Hazan. He was Masak and Berchas Hazan. It's a level that's totally above and beyond expression. So how do you express it? So we need the expressors. Torah, on the other hand, is Torah Peh, Torah Shebal Peh. So as we say every Erev Shabbos in Tikkun in Pasach Aliyah, Tikkun Zehar. So Torah is the new expression. So basically, Torah is going to be that which is mechaber the two. So Moshe, the Alter Rebbe says, Moshe, who atzmi is chachmei la, k'meshe devuka l'mayla b'sharsha. And therefore, he wasn't able to bring it down to the lower levels, the inyan of kvad pen, kvad lashon. So Torah becomes the memutza, that's mechaber, the atzmi of chachmei la, which we said was the chachmas sima, which is totally above and beyond any kalim whatsoever, to bring it down into chachma tata, which is the inyan of malchus, bechinas malchus. So Torah is mechaber, and listen to this line here. You just get this one line, you're good to go. Sha'atera hi ha-mechaberes bechinas makar neshamas Yisrael she'alu b'machshava im bechinas ha-neshama ha-mispashatas beguf. That's the whole inyan of Torah. It's mechaber, the neshama, the way that is above and beyond she'alu b'machshava. That's the very first source of the neshama. To get it down into the neshama, the way that it comes out down into our body, in the naran of the body, in our actual expression of our neshama. How do you connect the two? Torah is the connection between the two. And in the ruchnius levels, it's the inyan of chachma, sesima, and keser into the level of malchus. All right. And so too, we have the hamshacha from the level of mibechinas berchas hazan, from the level of zan, that it should be nimshach from moichas sesima, from the level of Tala, the Bedulcha, that it should be drawn down into Malchus of Atzilus. So again, we're talking about the same idea. Now the Alter Rebbe is going to be explaining these two different levels of Chachma, that you have the inyan of Chachma Ilah, basically is Chachma of Atzilus, and the inyan of Chachma Tata, the Chachma of Malchus, and based on the pasuk of Chachma is Bachutz Torayna. So Chachma is Bachutz, meaning the way that it's going to be the gilui of chachma is going to come ultimately down bachutz into biyah. So you're going to need two different levels of chachma to be able to accomplish this. You can't just have the lower level of chachma. You can't just have the higher level of chachma. You need both levels of chachma. You need beis bechinas chachma in order to bring it to be able to, that it should ultimately be able to be brought down lamata into Elohe's biyah. As we see here in the box, you have the inyan of chachma sesima, being drawn down into Chachma Tata'a, that is through the Torah. And that's Chachmais Bachutz Torena, that basically the way to get Chachmais, that the ultimate point of Chachma is that it has to be Nimshach into Biyah. You're going to need all of these various levels of the higher levels of Yishtalshus and the lower levels in order to be able to push it forth, so to speak, into the level of into Biyah. The Alter Rebbe is now going to explain Eifen Acher Kitzas, and I should make a disclaimer. I don't claim to understand all of this. I'm just trying to explain it to the best of my ability. V'Hashem Hatei V'Chaper. But now the Alter Rebbe is going to explain in Eifen Acher Kitzas that we see here in the box, drawing from Chachma Ilah, from that's Chachma Vatzilus down into Chachma Tata. In order to achieve that, you actually have to draw from a much higher level, from Chachma Sisima'a. So, and through drawing it from the highest level, so Chachma Sisima is in the level of Atik. And as far as Atik is concerned, Chachma Ilah and Chachma Tata, there's no difference between the two. So how do you get something to go from Chachma Ilah into Chachma Tata? Basically, you draw in from Atik. As far as Atik is concerned, there's no difference. So now you can have a Hamshech from the higher level to the lower level. This is brought many times in Chassidus. Isa Shalom Bimreimav, the Indian of Michael and Gabriel, that they're able to make Shalom because when they're Bimreimav, they're before the Eibishter. So basically, the two opposites are able to come together because before them, there's a total bittul. But basically, the idea over here, the Kamei Shav and Atzilus Ubiyah. So when you draw in from the higher level, that's able to draw the Hamshacha from Chachma Ilah into Chachma Tata. Before we explained it was through the Inyan of Torah. How this is connected with the Inyan of Torah, I'm not sure exactly. We said that Moshe Rabbeinu himself, at his own essential level, he could not bring the Torah to articulation. The whole idea of the Torah is that it's the etzlai amoin, and amoin is the idea of a pedagogue. Basically, the idea of a pedagogue is how you can take something and bring it and teach it to children. Even in this English word, pedagogy. So Moshe didn't have this level. That's why he said to Hashem that how could I take the Yidden and take them into my bosom? Kasher Yisa ha'oimen asayenik. He didn't have that quality of Yisa ha'oimen asayenik, whereas the Inyan of Torah actually is ultimately that level. And we see that Moshe Rabbeinu himself ultimately also overcame that, because originally he said, Lo yish devarim anechi, but ultimately it was Eila hadvarim asher dibar Moshe that he was able to ultimately bring the full articulation. But the whole idea, again, in this whole Ba'ifan Acher is all explaining the idea that you're being mamshich from Atik, from Moicha Sisima, in order to get the Hamshacha from Chachma into Malchus. Okay. And now we understand why we need the Inyan of Bris. Well, we didn't speak about the Inyan of Bris yet. So now so far we spoke a little bit about the Inyan of Torah. The Torah is that which is mamshich, that gets the upper level into the lower level. It brings that hamshacha. Now, why do we need the Inyan of Bris? So Bris is basically the basic point of the Alter Rebbe here is going to be that Bris is the Inyan of Yesod. And basically, to give a Hagdama Klolis, you have the Sfiris. You have Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Chod, Yesod. These are called Zah. These are the midos, the way they are more atzmim. What do we mean by atzmim? They are the speaking about the Eibishter, they are the Eibishter himself. Malchus, of course, becomes the Inyan of Peh, which is the Inyan of expression, how it now becomes expressed to another. So you have the way that things are to themselves, unto themselves, and then the way they become expressed to another, which is Malchus. So how do you get from one to the other? How do you get from the way that I am to myself to the way that I'm now going to express to others? That is the Bechina of Yesod. So Yesod connects that which is above, in other words, the way that something is more essentially unto itself, to express itself, it connects it to the level of Malchus below that it should be able to be expressed, Lamata. And this, we know this is the level, but this is the level of Bris, which is the level of Yisrael. This is the level of Yosef. So the Alter Rebbe brings from the Zohar that Yosef is Shalit al Haaretz. Says in the Zohar, V'narla, B'zanla, Hamash B'lechol HaMa'aretz, Hu Nahar, D'nagir Nafik Pnei Yitzanu. So basically, this is the level of Malchus, Yesod, through which everything is sustained. So the Iker Mamshich and Mashpia into Eretz, we said before that it's coming from Torah, but really it needs this special connection of Yesod to bring it directly into Malchus, and that's the level of Yosef Tzadik Elyon. And this is explained many places in Chassidus based on what we say in Vayivarech David. We say L'cha Havaya Hagdula Hagvura Vatiferes Vanetzach Va'ahoid. Then we continue later L'cha Hashem Amlacha. What happened to Yesod? So we say Ki Chol Bashamayim Uva'aretz. Ki Chol Bashamayim Va'aretz, as the Alter Rebbe brings the Targum Onkelos, the Achid Bishmaya Va'ara, that the Indian of Yesod is Kol Bashamayim V'aretz is that which is Miyachet Shemayim, that which is above the way that something is unto itself, and Aretz, the way that something becomes expressed below, and Achid Bishmaya Va'ara, that is the Bechina, that's the level of Yesod. So we have Kinei Lecha V'Agdula Hainu Shamidas Datzil Same Bechinas Lecha Bechinas Bittel Mamesh. So there, it's not the union of Bittel Yesh. Bittel Yesh means you've got something and you have to be Mevatel the Yesh. But there it's Bittel Mamesh. There is nothing. So there is absolute Bittel to the Orin Seif Baruch Hu. And that is the level of Yichudei Law, as we've spoken above, right? That's the higher level than Lecha. Vayam Amlacha is the Inyan of Yichudei Tata, Bittel Hayesh, and that's the Bittel, the way that it becomes Nimshach Lemata in Eretz. And the whole idea is that we have to draw the Bittel from Yichudei Law into Yichudei Tata, like we've been speaking about before as well. And this is through how do we draw the Yichud of Yichudei Law into Yichudei Tata, which I believe means simply that Yichudei Tata, that's a lot of work, Bittul Hayesh. But even the fan, which we said above in the previous ICS, that's the whole purpose is Bittul Hayesh. But how do we even have the power to do that? Because there's a higher truth that is drawn into it. Maybe we don't get that truth. Maybe we don't understand. We're not operating on the higher level of truth, but it's only coming because there's the Yichudei Law that's nimshach into the Yichudei Tata. And because in order to have the inyan of Torah, in order to be able to have the inyan of Torah, you have to have the inyan of Bris. Therefore, the inyan of Bris is coming before Torah. So now the Alter Rebbe is going to go into quite a few explanations of why is it, okay, you have these different connectors of Bris and Torah. So Bris is the inyan of Yesod. Torah is drawing from the higher level of Chachma to the lower level of Chachma. So why is Bris coming before Torah? We say Al Brischa shechasamta b'bsoreinu, Val Teirascha shelimadatanu. What's the point of that? That one comes before the Bris comes before Torah. So the Rebbe gives several answers to this. I believe 6 different, and it's a little bit hard to understand the absolute difference between all of these levels, but we'll go into them and understand them as well as I can express it here. So the first point is that the Inyan, we said above that Yesod is the level of Kol, Ki Chol Bashamayim of Aretz, and Kol is called the Melamed. It is the actual teacher. So you have the Inyan of Torah, but for Torah you need the teacher, so to speak, and that's the Inyan of Yesod, the Melamed. Mikol Melamdai Hiskalti, right? So Kol is my Melamed that brought me wisdom. Shebechinas Kol hu Melamed hu mamshich hatera bebechinas Malchus. So you need, it's a joint effort, but the whole all-around level is the level of Yesod, and that's mamshich the Torah. So you need Bris first to be able to be mamshich the Torah. Then we have another point that I don't believe the Alter Rebbe explains here very much. He explains the inyan of Bris is the Pesach the Torah. So the Bris is the Pesach, the opening for Torah. So as we say, Kashem shenichnas lebris, ken yikonis l'Torah. So you have to have the Pesach of Bris first. So you have that portal that's opened, and now you can have the inyan of Torah. Now, another idea the Rebbe starts in Ois Dalid, so now we're coming on to the third explanation of why Bris comes before Torah, is basically that the inyan of Bris is drawn from a higher source than Torah itself. So the inyan of Bris is the inyan of Hiskashrus. So for instance, you have the father that is Mekasher his seichel with the seichel of his son while he's learning, and he has a great love and a great desire. There's a great love and desire. You can't get something from its source to its recipient in an effective way without that drive, without that passion, without that love, and without that desire in what you're teaching. And so that love and that cheshek is really what drives it forth, and that's the level of Yesod. And the Alter Rebbe says, so a person might think that this level of Hiskashrus is okay, it's a detail. No, it's really that passion and that drive and that love and desire and the transference of the information is coming from a higher level. And because it's coming from a higher level, that's why Bris is coming before Torah. And then the Alter Rebbe goes into more Kabbalistic ideas here, and explains that that now we have the inyan of Bechina of Yesod Sho Mechaber Mamshich B'Bechinas Yichud Eilah B'Yichud Tata. The whole idea, again, the object of the game is to draw from Yichud Eilah into Yichud Tata, and that has to be through the inyan of Yesod. And the Alter Rebbe is now going to explain this inyan that Yesod, in a sense, just like so you have Chachma. So let's just talk about the level of Chachma Ilah, Chachma Vatzilus. We know Chachma Me Ayin Timatze. Chachma comes from a level of what we call Ayin. So just like Atzilus, the Chachma Vatzilus, there's an Ayin that precedes it. So the Chachma Tata, which is Malchus, also has an Ayin which precedes it, which is the level of Yesod. So Yesod, in this sense, is rooted in the level of Arich, which is the inyan of Ayin. And from that, you're able to get to the inyan of Malchus. So that's the inyan of Mazla, which is the inyan, which is it comes even higher than which is higher than the inyan of Torah. All right, this is what the Alter Rebbe explains all over here. Now, another explanation, perhaps this would be the fifth explanation, is that we know from Rambam, from the Gemara, that Bris Milah has got 13 brises are mentioned regarding Bris Milah, and 3 brises are mentioned regarding Torah. So which one is higher? The inyan of Bris Milah is higher than Torah. But now the Alter Rebbe explains that, and I believe the meaning of the pasuk, Im loy brisi yemam v'layla chukos shemayim v'aretz leisamti. That's showing the inyan of Bris, which is higher than the inyan of chukos shemayim v'aretz, which is the inyan of Torah. So, Shaliyes Hamshachim Bechinas Shemayim Yichud Eilah Seviv Kalalim Be'aretz Yichud Tata is through the inyan of Bris that is Mekasher and Mechaber. I think that the ultimate point over here is that we have, sometimes you have a high level, you have a low level, and you're connecting, and then you have the connectors between the higher level and the lower level. And sometimes it's easy to think and assume that these connector levels are, it's like you have a translator. Someone speaks this language. If you have two heads of state speaking to each other, you have a translator between them. The translator is garnished. He's just someone who happens to know both languages, but he's not of any true level. But Chassidus and Kabbalah explained that the inyan of the connectivity between these two disparate levels really comes from a much higher place. Alter Rebbe alluded to that earlier, right? In order to bring the two together, you really has to be coming from a much higher place, and that's the inyan of the the inyan of bris, the inyan of Yesod, connected with the 13 brisais. This is really connected with even a higher level than Torah itself. And the Alter Rebbe explains here that we know you have the inyan of Yud Gimel Brises are connected to the Yud Gimel Tikunei Dikna in the higher beard, and the Zohar tells us this is also true in the Dikna Tata. So you have in the level of Yesod, you also have the inyan of these 13, which is connected to the inyan of connected to Bris, right? There you have it obviously. But even in the inyan of Yud Gimel Tikunei Dikna with the higher beard and the lower beard, you also have this connectivity between the two, showing that the inyan of Bris is higher than the inyan of Torah. So based on all of this, we can explain yet another explanation of why Bris is coming before Torah. And here, basically, the Alter Rebbe is going to be explaining that the sheirish of Bris is from Arich, whereas Torah Shebal Peh is coming from the level of, it's sourced in the level of Chachma Ilah, and Bris is sourced in the level of Arich. V'oid ki al-Torah shebichsav, even Torah shebichsav, sher shemichachma ilah, u'mila shnichru salal, shalosh yasei brises, hainu yud gimel tikunei dikna da'arich, u'chenal shesher shayisei nimshich v'nasa b'bechinas arich. And we'll understand all of this ba'avoda. Let's do this a little bit, so we'll see the actual something ba'avoda that we can maybe perceive a little bit better. Kibris hu bechinas hiskashrus v'cheshek v'ava rabba shebechinas seviv v'chol almin. So the whole inyan of bris is the cheshek and Torah, the enthusiasm and the excitement of Torah. This is the inyan of what we're talking about. This is what the inyan of bris, the level of Yesod, this is what it's about. This is b'chol me'edecha, as explained elsewhere, and this is the inner will of the heart, which is the keser Torah. So this level is nimshach into thought, speech, and action, which of course is the manifestation of Torah through the three levushim. The person has to be mekayim Torah at these three levels, and that's the idea of the three brises of Torah: is machshava, dibur, and maisa, to bring it into the gimel olamais of Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, which are the levels of Machshava, Dibur, and Maisa. And that's why it says, Lichvayri, Brasiv, Yetzartiv, Af, Asisiv, and Ein Kovid ala Torah. And that's the Hamshacha, the way that the Hamshacha is coming from Atzilus into Biyah. But that's all the inyan of Torah. But Bris is the Re'usa Deliba, the inner desire and passion of it. Interesting idea. And that's why we have to have the inyan of Bris before the inyan of Torah. Because it is the Hamshach of the Orein Seif Baruch Hu into Chachma through Keser. And after that, it can be drawn into Machshava, Dibur, and Maisa. And that's the main idea that we're marked in Bris LaTorah, because from the level of Bris and the level of Yesod of Arich, it's Nimshach into Torah, which is the level of Zah. And that's called the level of Zakein, Shekana Chachma. It's Mekabel from Yesod and Arich. So now the Alter Rebbe concludes the first part of the pasuk v'zel ve'achalta v'zavata uveirachta es. So v'zavata is the hamshacha of rotzain. That's severe. We should be satisfied, and that's connected, of course, to rotzain. V'nizba lechem v'niya tovim, and this is l'chol chai, which is the level of tzaddik Yesod Eilam. We said above that the inyan of kol is the inyan of Yesod. And this is also Pesach Es Yodecha, which are the Yud Gimel Tikunei Dikna, Mazla Ilah, the higher level of Mazal, which is Arich. And through this, he's Masbiel, the Chol Chai Rotzen, he draws down the Rotzen and the passion and the excitement, the Yesod, right, into every being. And that's the Hamshachas HaRatzin V'Ava Rabba B'Nefesh Adam. Isn't that what we're all looking for? The Hamshach of Ratzin and Ava Rabba into the soul of man. Bechinas Rusa de Liba. That's being drawn from the highest source, but basically the on-ramp into the human soul is through the level of Yesod. And this is through that, what do you have now the ability to do? Uvirachta es. Uvirachta es Hashem Elokecha. Es is the level of Malchus, to be able to draw from the Seviv of Kol Almin, as we said above, the whole thrust of the Maimer is the idea of taking from the higher level, from the Seviv, and drawing into Mamale, being Mechaber, the Yehuda Ilah with the Yehuda Tata'a, and that's B'Savato Virachta es, Uvirachta, the bracha has to come down into the es, into the level of Malchus. And now the Alter Rebbe continues with the third bracha, the union of Bnei Yerushalayim, which is Toiva, right? We said, V'achalta v'zavata v'irachta es Hashem Elokecha al ha'aretz. Ha'aretz is Birchas ha'aretz. Ha'toiva is referring to Bnei Yerushalayim. As the Gemara says, Ha'toiva is ha'ar ha'toiv v'halavana, that's referring to Yerushalayim. V'nei tzarech liyais da'aretz hu b'chinas malchus v'Yerushalayim hu gam ken malchus. Okay, so here the Alter Rebbe basically asks a question, which is, all right, we understand aretz. Aretz is the union of malchus, and you have to take from the higher yichud into the lower yichud, so that you should be able to do the birur, the bittul hayesh, all of the aveda, all of the everything that we encounter in our everyday life, all of our challenges and difficulties of making adir la'yizbarach b'dachteinim. Okay, that's aretz. That's dealing with edish zachen, earthly matters, mundane matters, and elevating everything above. But then what's the inyan of Yerushalayim? Yerushalayim is also the inyan of Malchus, Malchus of Atzilus. So it seems to be superfluous. So what's the inyan? So I'm going to, so the Alter Rebbe brings a Zayhar from Gemalasu Teiv V'loira Kol Yemei Chayeha. So Zminas Teiv, so speaking about a hashpa, basically the Zayhar is talking about the connection between Yesod and Malchus, and when there's a proper hamshacha from Yesod into Malchus, then there's not going to be any ra, there's not going to be any psilas, there's not going to be any unikas hachitzenim. So it's going to be Teiv V'loira, as the pasuk says. So Teiv Emasai Bezimna the Inun Yemei Shemayim Nadin Chulu. So when there's a proper hamshacha from the from Yemei HaShemayim, which is the level of Zah coming from above, then you have the inyan of Teiv and not Ra. So to understand this, so now we're going to have a very Yesodisdike explanation of the inyan of Man and Mad, Mayin Nukvin and Mayin Duchrin. Mayin Nukvin is basically the work that we do below, that is somewhat connected to the inyan of Isarusa de Lasata. Maim Duchrin is the Hamshacha Milmaila, somewhat associated with the inyan of Isarusa de La'ela, but here the Alter Rebbe is going to give us a very beautiful beer of exactly what's going on. So Haman, hu Masha Malchus Mevareres Bibiyah, Miklipas Nega, She Bechinas Yesh V'Davar Nifred, Liyas Nichlal Bebechinas Bittel. So man is our avoda of the birurim in biyah, the klipas nega, which is we know klipa is yesh and davar nifred. It's a different reality of the world. That world is the reality, not God. Right? It's a davar nifred, and our avoda is to be mevara, to bring out that no, to bring in the bittul that no, it's only einayd milvade, and this is our avoda of bittul hayesh, and that's the avoda of man. So we have food and we make a bracha on the food, and we're taking a davar yesh, something maybe we might even enjoy, and we make a bracha on it, and we're taking the energy from that food and we're using it for limud hatera v'chulu v'chulu, all of our whole aveda. This is all the bittul hayesh. That's what we call man. This is the aveda milmata, basically, that we're doing with the world to refine the world. Afterwards, what is drawn is the Mayim Duchrin, which is Bebechinas Shema. So the Birur is the level of Ban. Again, these are the Shemus, different gematrias of the Shemus Havaya. So the Birur is in the Sheman, man, but mad and mayin duchrin is the bechin of shem ma bittel amitis. We said above. What is the true bittel? The true bittel is that you don't have to be mevatel. There's not a bittel hayesh, and in the zav atzilus you can't speak about bittel hayesh. There's no yesh to be mevatel. It's bittel amiti. So it's the bittel amiti levarer haman ashe yuchlal belukus mamish liis bebechinas bittel shabatzilus. So basically what the Alter Rebbe is explaining here, beautiful idea, where we do the bittul hayesh. After you do the bittul hayesh on that nice apple that you ate, so it doesn't become spirituality exactly, right? I mean, we do whatever work we can bibechinas man in the level of maim nukvin. But then comes the Maim Duchrin. The Maim Duchrin takes the work that we did and lifts it up to be Nichlal Mamish in Elokus. So it's a two-part process of elevation. One is the level of Man, and that is going to be connected to the level of Eretz, and that's the bracha Al Haaretz, right? Al Haaretz Ve'al HaMazon, which is the bitla yesh yichud tata that we've been talking about until now, but then the inyan of Bnei Yerushalayim is yet a higher level of hiskalulus, that it takes whatever we did and now makes it nichlal mamish belukus, that it should be totally nullified in atzilus, that it should be a bitl amiti, which is the inyan of iu v'garmoyichad, iu v'chayoyichad, that there is no separation whatsoever. So we can't do this on our own. We can do our aveda b'chinas in the level of man, but then mad takes it yet higher. And that's the inyan of the third bracha of Birchas Hamazon. And this is the inyan of Yerushalayim habenuya shechubra lo yachtav. What is the chubra layachtav? That's the ear of that everything is united and brought together. It is uniting the or of the Seviv Kalalmin, which is the Ein Seif Baruch Hu, to be Meir and Atzilus in Memale Kalalmin. And that's the inyan of Gamalasu Taiv, that now with Tesefes Or is drawn down into Zah from a level that's even higher than Eitz HaChayim. So through our service, we basically end up drawing down the highest level of light, even into the world of Atzilus. So, and this is the inyan that Eretz is mekabelis from the level of Ayin, Shalamayla me'achachma, Hayesh ba'etz yimayin. This is based on that pasuk. So Eretz is mekabel from the level of Ayin, which is higher than Chachma, because no, it's the techila, the very beginning is wedged into the end. And this happens through our birur. So the Indian, so it's all accomplished and achieved through the work on the very lowest level, draws down from the very highest level. And now the Alter Rebbe is going to go and associate all of this with Shabbos and Lechem Mishnah very beautifully. And we spoke above about the Indian of Lechem Min Hashemayim. Lechem Min Hashemayim is the man, right? And lechem min haaretz, you're very familiar with. So this is the shtei lechem of Shabbos. The fact that we have lechem, not the shtei lechem, that's the Shavuos. Lechem Mishnah, right? Lechem Mishnah that we have on Shabbos. What is the inyan of lechem Mishnah? That we're being mechaber and bringing together these two disparate levels from the highest of the high, the moichas sima that has no kelim to hold this light whatsoever, and the Chachma Tata, the lower level, the Lechem Min Haaretz, our Aveda of Birurim, it's all one. And on Shabbos, it all becomes united, that the two Lechamim become united, that there's no difference between the two. The Achar calls that Yuva, and after all of this, we'll understand the inyan of Lechem Mishnah of Shabbos. And Shabbos is the Chibur and the Hiskalulus of these two Lechamim, of these two levels of two breads, of Lechem Min Hashemayim and the Lechem Min Haaretz. And that's the Chibur, that's the unity of Yichud Ilah and Yichud Tata. That the Yichud Ilah and Yichud Tata, the Alter Rebbe says, are mamish equal. On Shabbos, they're mamish the same thing. That's the name Zachar and Shamar B'dibur Echad. You would think Zachar is a much higher level. Shamar is keeping away from doing Avodah. No, it's Dibur Echad. It's all Ein Zach. It's all one thing. And that's the hiskalus. That's the two are enmeshed, embedded in each other, and they're totally one. Over Shabbos, hiskalel lechem tatab lechem ilah. So the lower level bread becomes incorporated in the higher level bread. And as it says in the Zohar, that lechem oini becomes lechem panag, from the lechem of oppression, of persecution, becomes the bread of luxury, the bread of delight. And this is the whole avodah of the weekday and the difficulty and the struggles that we have. It comes out on Shabbos that it's all beautiful, it's all luxurious, it's all bringing the essence of Hashem. But we don't have just one lechem celebrating the great achievement and the great high level of the essence. No, we have two lechamim, because all of our work during the week is incorporated into the higher bread. Then on Shabbos, Bechinas Aliyas, and on Shabbos, Biter is Asur, and Aliyah Zuhi, Lamaila, Be'en Sevarchu, Bechinas Ki Imcha Mekor Chayim. So this is all the Aliyah, that all of the work that we did it all becomes elevated to the highest level, and you have an absolute unity between Likkutei Torah and Likkutei Torah. They become totally one. And this is basically the inyan of Lechem Mishnah of Shabbos, Beis Lechamim, Lechem min Hashemayim and Lechem min Haaretz, Shehem Miskalim Ke'echad. So the whole work. So it's very interesting, because in the benching, of course, we have first Birchas Hazan, then we have Birchas Haaretz, then we have Birchas Bnei Yerushalayim, right? Which are a sequence of three different levels that the Alter Rebbe explained in the Maimer. But on Shabbos, it all becomes nichlal in one. You still have to bench a full benching on Shabbos, but nevertheless, in the spiritual levels, all of these lechamim all become niskalim be'echad mamish. And this is through the aliyahs of Shabbos, because on Shabbos, everything that we did during the week now becomes elevated to the highest level, to its source, which is ultimately the reconnection with the whole purpose and point of existence of our Aveda.